On the evening of April 18, 2017, 10-year-old Hayden Clark was supposed to walk home from his best friend Lucas's house. The boys had spent the afternoon playing video games and riding bikes around the neighborhood. It was a normal Tuesday. School had let out early for teacher conferences, and the spring weather had been warm and bright. Hayden's mother, Rachel, had reminded him to be home by 6 p.m. for dinner. Lucas lived just 3 blocks away, on the same quiet street Hayden had walked since he was in kindergarten. Everyone in the neighborhood knew him, the boy with the big brown eyes and red sneakers who always had a soccer ball nearby. When 6:15 came and went, Rachel started to worry. She texted Hayden, but there was no response. She called Lucas's mother, who said Hayden had left almost 30 minutes earlier. Assuming he may have stopped at the corner store or been distracted talking to someone, Rachel set off walking the usual route herself. She retraced every sidewalk and shortcut Hayden would have taken, even checking the nearby playground. Nothing. By 7 p.m., the sun was beginning to set, and Rachel called the police. The officers arrived quickly and took the report seriously. Hayden wasn't the kind of child who wandered off or disobeyed curfews. By 8 p.m., neighbors had joined in the search. Flashlights flickered along fences and backyards. Cars slowly cruised up and down the streets, scanning for any sign of the missing boy. People knocked on doors, checked garages, and called Hayden's name into the growing darkness. At 9:22 p.m., one of the volunteers found something odd in a narrow alley behind an abandoned house. It was Hayden's jacket, folded neatly and placed on top of a stack of bricks. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood, no torn fabric, nothing else, just the jacket, as if someone had deliberately left it there. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why would Hayden take off his jacket and fold it? Why in an alley he had no reason to walk through? The police cordoned off the area and began a more detailed search. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Drones scanned the nearby fields. Helicopters circled above with searchlights cutting through the night. But there was no trace of Hayden. No witnesses had seen him walking after he left Lucas's. Security cameras on nearby buildings were either broken or failed to show anything useful. The case became stranger by the hour. By midnight, the search had grown from a neighborhood effort into a city-wide manhunt. Volunteers set up a command post at the local high school. Tips began pouring in, but none were helpful. A few people reported seeing a boy matching Hayden's description at a gas station or walking along the railroad tracks, but nothing panned out. Every second that passed made the situation more grim. It had been hours, and a 10-year-old boy had completely vanished from a quiet, well-lit neighborhood in broad daylight. For his family, the nightmare had only just begun. The disappearance of Hayden Clark quickly shattered the illusion of safety in Muncie. It was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked during the day and waved at every passing car. But in the days that followed April 18th, the mood changed. Parents began walking their kids to school instead of letting them ride their bikes. Porch lights stayed on all night. Rumors and fear spread faster than the facts. Everyone was talking about what might have happened to the boy who vanished in daylight. Was it a stranger who had passed through town? Or was it someone local, someone who knew the area and had been watching Hayden? The police formed a special task force and set up a tip line. Flyers with Hayden's face were plastered all over town, on stop signs, storefront windows, and gas station walls. His school left his desk untouched, covered in cards from classmates. Rachel Clark made emotional pleas on television, begging for her son's return. But as the hours turned into days and the days into weeks, hope began to fade. The initial search turned up nothing beyond Hayden's jacket. No signs of a struggle. No witnesses who saw him after 6 p.m. The investigators were left with more questions than answers. Then, 3 weeks after Hayden vanished, a woman named Susan Prater contacted the police. She lived 2 streets away from the Clarks and said she remembered seeing a black SUV circling the neighborhood around the time Hayden disappeared. At first, she didn't think anything of it. But when she saw Hayden's face on the news, she remembered the SUV had no license plate and tinted windows. It had driven slowly, pausing in front of certain houses before disappearing toward the edge of the neighborhood. Investigators took the tip seriously. They reviewed traffic cameras and nearby surveillance footage but found very little. Only one camera, belonging to a liquor store 5 blocks away, captured a blurry image of a black SUV turning onto a side street at 6:07 p.m. It wasn't enough to trace the driver, but it gave them a direction. From there, they created a list of all black SUVs registered within a 10-mile radius. One name stood out: Jeremy Flanders, a substitute teacher who had worked at Hayden's elementary school several times that year. He owned a black Chevrolet Suburban and lived alone in a modest home near the edge of town. He had no criminal record, no complaints from students or parents, and no history of suspicious behavior. When questioned, Flanders said he had been home the evening Hayden disappeared. He claimed to have watched TV and cooked dinner. He even gave investigators the name of a friend he had spoken to on the phone during that time. At first, his story checked out. But when detectives pulled his cell phone records, they noticed something odd. His phone had pinged off a cell tower near Sycamore Street around 6:10 p.m., right in the time frame Hayden was believed to have gone missing. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make him a person of interest. Still, without physical evidence, they couldn't arrest him. So, they kept watching. In May 2018, just over a year after Hayden Clark vanished, a surprising break in the case finally surfaced. Two fishermen were casting lines along the White River, about 10 miles outside of Muncie, when one of them noticed something caught in a cluster of branches along the shoreline. At first glance, it looked like debris, trash washed down by spring rains. But as they got closer, they realized it was a backpack, faded and waterlogged, with bright-colored patches peeling from the fabric. One of the patches was a small embroidered soccer ball. The fishermen turned it over to authorities, who quickly identified it as Hayden Clark's missing backpack. Inside the bag were several items that belonged to Hayden: a few notebooks, some trading cards, and a handheld gaming device with a cracked screen. What shocked investigators the most was a small reddish-brown stain on the backpack's zipper. Forensic testing later confirmed it was blood, and it matched Hayden's DNA. The discovery reignited interest in the case across the country. News outlets returned to Muncie. Candlelight vigils were held again. The Clark family stood in front of cameras, hoping the recovered backpack meant they were one step closer to answers. The police turned their focus to the river. Divers were brought in to search the surrounding area, scanning the waterbed and nearby woods for any sign of human remains or additional evidence. Over the course of several days, they found nothing else. Still, the backpack's location raised a critical question: how did it get there? Was Hayden taken to the river and then discarded? Or had someone planted it there, hoping to lead investigators off track? Satellite images from the day Hayden disappeared were reviewed by state and federal analysts. One enhanced image showed a vehicle parked on a gravel pull-off near the river trail at 6:17 p.m. The shape and proportions of the vehicle, although blurry, were consistent with a Chevrolet Suburban, just like the one driven by Jeremy Flanders. Investigators immediately brought Flanders in for more questioning. This time, his story changed slightly. He admitted to driving near the river on April 18th, saying he sometimes stopped there to walk and clear his head. He insisted it was a coincidence and continued to deny having anything to do with Hayden's disappearance. Despite his denial, detectives knew they were circling closer to the truth. Flanders refused to take a polygraph test and declined to answer further questions. Still, police had no hard evidence placing Hayden inside his vehicle or home. Everything was circumstantial. Public suspicion around Flanders grew, especially among parents at Hayden's school. He was quietly removed from the school's substitute teacher list, but no charges were filed. The case grew cold again, but the discovery of the backpack had changed the direction of the investigation. It confirmed what many feared: Hayden had not run away. He had met with violence. And whoever was responsible had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. Investigators now believed they were dealing with someone who knew the area well, and knew exactly how to hide. In early 2020, nearly 3 years after Hayden Clark vanished, a young couple purchased a foreclosed property on the outskirts of Muncie. The small, 2-bedroom home had sat empty for over a year, its lawn overgrown and its interior in disrepair. The couple, Noah and Leanne Brooks, were planning to renovate the house themselves and eventually turn it into a rental. They had no idea the role the house would play in solving the town's most haunting mystery. While working in the basement one afternoon, Noah began removing warped floorboards to replace them with new ones. As he pried up a thick, rotting board in the back corner of the room, something caught his attention. It was a small red object, partially buried in the dirt beneath the floor. He reached in and pulled it out. It was an old mud-caked sneaker, child-sized, with faded white laces and a partially worn-out logo. It looked eerily similar to the red sneakers Hayden had been wearing the day he disappeared. Leanne, unsettled by the discovery, called the police just to be safe. When detectives arrived and examined the shoe, they quickly confirmed it was indeed one of Hayden's. Forensic teams were dispatched to the property immediately. The house, it turned out, had once belonged to Jeremy Flanders. He had sold it in 2019 and left Muncie shortly after. Investigators had previously searched the property in 2017, but only the visible parts, nothing beneath the floors. This time, they tore the basement apart. In the crawlspace, under the dirt floor, they found more evidence. A few strands of hair, later confirmed to be Hayden's, were discovered tangled in the insulation. More disturbingly, there were faint traces of blood on the underside of the subfloor, preserved in areas that hadn't been cleaned. Forensic analysis dated the blood to around the time of Hayden's disappearance. Cadaver dogs brought to the site alerted strongly in the same corner where the sneaker had been buried. It appeared that Hayden had been in that basement, possibly for days. With this new physical evidence, police secured a warrant for Jeremy Flanders's arrest. He was found living 2 states away and was taken into custody without incident. Charged with kidnapping and murder, Flanders denied everything. He claimed the evidence had been planted and insisted he was being framed. But investigators weren't convinced. When searching Flanders's belongings, they found a locked wooden chest stored in a storage unit he had been renting. Inside were dozens of notebooks, drawings, and handwritten pages filled with disturbing thoughts and cryptic references to a secret he had buried. One passage read, "The crying wouldn't stop. I had no choice. Now the silence lives where no one dares look." Though Hayden's body was still missing, prosecutors had enough to proceed. Flanders's trial drew national attention. For weeks, the court heard testimony from forensic experts, neighbors, and Hayden's devastated family. It was a painful chapter for Muncie, but also the beginning of long-awaited answers. The case, once cold, was now burning with evidence hidden beneath floorboards, sealed in journals, and whispered through years of silence. In the spring of 2023, just months after Jeremy Flanders was convicted of the kidnapping and murder of Hayden Clark, a discovery was made that would finally bring the last, painful answers the Clark family had waited 6 long years to receive. On the outskirts of Muncie, near a wooded area not far from the White River, a new homeowner was digging a fire pit behind a small cabin-style house. As he turned over the damp earth, his shovel hit something solid. At first, he assumed it was a buried piece of concrete or construction debris. But as he dug deeper, the outline of a tarp emerged, weathered, dirt-stained, and tied shut with rotting cord. He stopped digging and immediately called the authorities. Detectives arrived within the hour. The site was sealed off, and a forensic team worked through the evening, carefully unwrapping what was found inside. Beneath layers of fabric and plastic were the skeletal remains of a child. A blue jacket, folded and placed alongside the bones, was later confirmed to be the same one Hayden had been wearing on the day he disappeared. Dental records and DNA testing conclusively identified the remains as Hayden Clark. The news swept through Muncie like a wave, reopening wounds that had never truly healed. For Hayden's parents, it was the moment they had both longed for and feared. Now there was no more doubt. No more hope that he might be out there, alive, waiting to be found. He was gone. But at least now, they could finally lay him to rest. The autopsy revealed heartbreaking details. There were signs of blunt force trauma to Hayden's skull, likely the cause of death. The medical examiner also found evidence that the boy had been restrained before he died. He had suffered for some time, perhaps days, before his life was taken. The nature of the burial, the care in folding the jacket, and the remote location suggested someone familiar with the area had taken great effort to hide the body. It was clear that the killer had visited the site before and had likely chosen it long before the murder took place. This new evidence further solidified Jeremy Flanders's guilt. Though already convicted, the recovery of Hayden's body helped bring legal closure to the case. Investigators returned to Flanders's storage unit and re-examined his journals. In one entry, buried between pages of rambling nonsense, was a line that now made horrifying sense: "The woods keep their promise. No one will ever find him where the earth eats secrets." A second, final trial was not needed. but the judge approved a motion to formally link the burial site to the previous charges. Flanders, now serving a life sentence, never spoke a word publicly about the discovery. Each April, Muncie now holds a memorial near the river. A plaque bearing Hayden's name stands near the school he once attended. The community, though still haunted, found a measure of peace in knowing what had happened. Hayden's story became a painful reminder that evil doesn't always come from strangers. It can live quietly among us, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.